Oh, thank you. What a beautiful message for us today. The song answers a question. My title today is actually, What's Next? What's Next? And the song just answered it pretty much because I don't need to know. End of story, huh? I'm talking about change. And September does bring about a sense of, albeit subtle here in Florida, but a sense of changing seasons and therefore a sense of back to school and change. And that brings me to thinking especially about the process of change in our own lives. You know, although we don't notice a lot of the times, life is always in motion, always changing every single nanosecond of the day and night. Some of those changes we welcome. In fact, some of the changes we initiate. And some we resist and we dread. So I call it the agony and the ecstasy of change. And you know, at the core of every Sunday message that you hear here is this beautiful reminder that the Creator's intention for its creation, God's intention for us, God by whatever name, is that we live, that we thrive, that we are bursting forth with possibilities, with joy and fulfillment, continually discovering and expressing our never, ever ending potential. That is the intention of life for us. And I know that in the day-to-day stuff that we're immersed in and that we hear, we forget that. I forget that. And so that's why we keep reminding ourselves every Sunday, every class, every time we have an opportunity that this is the essential impulse of life itself. And an integral part of experiencing this incredible life of change is, of course, change from birth till death. We couldn't experience this that God intends for us if there wasn't change. But one of the ways that we get in the way of that is by resisting change. One of the ways we get in the way of this beautiful process is we resist change. It's the unknown. And why would we do that? Why would we resist it if, in fact, it is the very pulse of life in our favor? Well, I think it's because we don't recognize change for what it really is. I think change has kind of gotten a bad rap at times. We might get sidetracked thinking things have changed and my life doesn't make sense anymore. And the truth is, it isn't that life doesn't make sense, it's just that life doesn't always make sense the way you were expecting it to. Can you relate? Because life, let's just face it, we always have expectations about how our life will make sense. So the deal is, change is really life's creative process. It's totally on our side. And I mean that of every expression of life, every human being. Life is on our side. Life supports life. It just has to. That's its nature. God/life. God supports God as us. It's always nudging us forward to grow and to have a blast, to really have a great life. So my theme for the 2 bookend talks that I'm doing this month, because you know I was away for 3 Sundays, is dancing with change. Dancing with change, kind of making it seem like, oh, well, not such a bad thing, dancing with it. And the first talk I did about this was about that space in between that feels like you're in between 2 trapeze bars, and often in the process of change, that is just exactly what it feels like. So that was on the first Sunday. And today I'm talking about what's next. And isn't that the question that we always ask somewhere in the back of our mind when we're facing change? What's next? Popular author Brené Brown said this about when we're facing that. She said, you know, we humans are hardwired to immediately make up a story when we're facing uncertainty, when we're facing the what's next. Immediately we make up a story. And frankly, it's usually a scary story. Anybody relate? You don't have to raise your hand, but, I will admit to that. I go right there. But take heart. As I reminded you the first Sunday of this month, from the minister, Dr. Roger Teal, who had the magnificent Mile High Center in Denver. And he's now retired. He wrote a wonderful book. And in it he talks about change. And he says change is the mask that transformation wears. Change is the mask that transformation wears. That's recognizing change for what it really is. So, it's not something that's meant to work your last good nerve and push you to the edge and keep you flailing. It really is a mask for transformation. What's going on in the midst of change is transformation. That is pretty wonderful. What's next? How about answering that in your head with transformation or creation? I love that word because that's what's always happening, transforming us, creating something new. In fact, I really would like to substitute the word create for change or creativity for changing, or I'm creating something instead of I'm facing change. How different would it feel if we realized it's a creative process? So I'm in the process of creating. I'm not in the process of just white-knuckle changing. In that context, see, it evokes a whole different story in our heads, the one we're making up. So let's consider three things about change and that looming question, what's next? And here are the three things. Number one, today we have sponge cake. Number two, you don't know what you don't know. And number three, what's falling apart just might be coming together. So what does sponge cake have to do with all this? Well, you may all know of Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, a marvelous physician who brought especially a broadening of the curriculum for medical doctors at Harvard and many, many, many other universities in subsequent years about bringing heart to medicine, bringing compassion to practicing medicine. Prior, when she was in medical school, she was astonished at how it was so mechanical and so technical and there was no heart. So that was her mission, and she has done some incredible work in that area as well as practicing medicine. But here's a story she tells about her grandmother, who grew up in very, very hard times and often there was very little to eat. So as an adult, her grandmother tended to stock her pantry and her ice box. This is back in the day. It was an ice box to the brim. So much so that if you were careless in how you opened that ice box door, an egg might fall out and crack on the floor. And Dr. Remen remembers her grandmother's reaction to that every time it would happen, and it was always the same. She would look at that broken egg with great satisfaction and say, "Aha, today we have sponge cake." And she would make a sponge cake. Well, this story about broken eggs being transformed, actually creating something else into sponge cakes, came back to Dr. Remen when she was a teenager, and she was diagnosed with severe, chronic, and lifelong Crohn's disease. It's very debilitating. It's very painful, and let me count the ways. That was not a change that certainly a teenager would be anticipating. So, what's next was a huge question in her mind, I'm sure. She was very shaken by the diagnosis. And her mother, being very practical, of course, after listening to her and comforting her, said, "Rachel, now we make sponge cake. Now we take this change and we make something creative and new with it." And Dr. Remen says that her mother's response, with reminding her of that story and the dynamic of it, really catapulted her into a trajectory of living with Crohn's, but productively and creatively and joyfully and with great serenity. Amidst all the many, many changes, she has certainly made far more than sponge cake with her life. The point is that when we're facing change and asking, what's next, we need to pay attention to the story we're making up. See, her grandmother made up a great story. We're going to make sponge cake. The truth is, we can make up any story we want to. Read my lips. We can make up any story we want to when we're asking, what's next? And when we're facing that uncertainty. Maybe your preference would be, no, today we make chocolate cake. Today we make red velvet cake. Or something more important and significant. Is there anything more important or significant? I don't know. But we can make up any story we want. And that is because of number 2, which is we don't know what we don't know. We do not know what we don't know. So when facing change and the anxiety of change and the what next story, we can change that into the exhilaration of transformation and creation. And why can we do that? Because as the song said, I don't need to know, but God knows. I don't need to know what's next, but God knows. And what does that mean? What does that mean? It doesn't mean some guy in the sky, up there with an agenda and a computer and all of that that knows but doesn't let you know. It means that the infinite, the universe, is totally all-knowing, and you have that in you. Let's talk about that a little bit. God, by whatever name you want to call it, infinite creative intelligence, infinite. You know what infinite is so big that even by giving it a name, we're kind of limiting it. It's beyond words. Infinite, endless. And that power created you and me out of itself, which means you and I have access to infinite resources. We've got that DNA, that spiritual DNA. We've got access to infinite resources beyond anything we could imagine or describe or certainly orchestrate. And the best thing about this, as you've already heard me alluding to this, is that as its beloved creation, it is totally on your side. Totally. Life is never against us. It's providing everything we could possibly need, and in ways that often will absolutely astound us. Totally surprise us. I mean, if you don't take away anything else this Sunday, take this week and watch for all the little and big God surprises. The ways in which life supports you, the way life scoops in and guides you or provides a person or a resource or an idea. You say, oh, well, that was just a coincidence. No, it was the one out there looking for all kinds of ways to support you in the what's next. Dr. Deepak Chopra talks about being in that place of what's next as being on the verge of the field of all possibilities or pure potential. Pure potential. And of course, scientists tell us now that everything in the universe is pure potential. It's all possibility. The Bible says in God all things are possible. Spiritual teachings will tell us that too. Science of Mind magazine for this month has a beautiful article by the architect of our teaching and philosophy, Dr. Ernest Holmes, called A Spiritual Universe. Check it out if you have the magazine. It is talking all about this. It's a spiritual universe, all in support of us. And so in view of this, when we're facing change, and instead of, oh no, what's next, we can proclaim, what's next? Bring it on. Bring it on. I wish I'd remember that all the time. I tend to forget it. Now, to experience this fully, there's one caveat. Don't micromanage the process. I know. We are such good micromanagers, aren't we? I mean, we want to know all the pieces are in place and what the pieces are and what they should be. And in order to really experience the magnitude of this support, when we're standing on the brink saying, what's next? We have to be willing to not micromanage. What do I mean by that? Well, here's what Dr. Ernest Holmes said. He said, is one way. He said, never insist that your good must come from a specific person, specific place, specific thing. Oh, I thought I had to make that up. No, you don't have to. You can, but that can get into micromanaging. He says, never insist on that. And why would he say that? Well, because when we insist on some specifics, it's because we're relying on what we already know. We're relying on our human material perspective, which is based always on what has happened before, what's happened all around us. Precedent. And it makes and the truth is, this principle of responding to us, I don't need to know because God knows, is not limited by precedent in the least. It doesn't even know, it only knows from now going forward, does not even know about precedent. But check your thinking this week when you're worried about something or planning or concerned about something and you're saying, it just doesn't, I can't figure it out. Are you referring to precedent? Are you referring to something or someone or somehow something that's happened in the past? Maybe even yesterday. Maybe even in a book you've read. I'm not discounting all of those. Those can funnel into your greater experience. But don't depend on those. Don't insist on those. Because here's what Holmes will go on to say. He says it makes no difference where or how things originate. Nothing can hinder the divine flow. Have you noticed when you're figuring out, well, it could be this way, but then there's this problem that would occur, and what about this I'm not sure about, and hindrances. But when we let go of that insistence, nothing can hinder the divine flow. And I will add again, prepare to be astounded. Now here's a little story that illustrates micromanaging of sorts. There's a pastor who was attending a farmer's breakfast in the Midwest, in the farm country, and he asked one of the farmers to say grace. So the farmer said, sure. And he began, oh, Lord, I hate buttermilk. The pastor kind of opened one eye and wondered, oops, where's this going to go? And then the farmer loudly proclaimed, Lord, I hate lard, and Lord, you know I don't care much for raw white flour. But, Lord, when you mix them all together and bake them up, I do love fresh biscuits. So, Lord, when things come up that we don't like, when life gets hard, when we just don't understand the changes we face, I guess we just need to relax and wait till you're done mixing. And probably it might even be something better than biscuits. Amen. So he knew his tendency to micromanage, and he also knew, hey, there's something greater. So you and I don't know what we don't know. Let's acknowledge that and not try to micromanage it. Judge Thomas Troward was an influence on Ernest Holmes and brilliant in terms of this whole process of how our mind works to access the infinite and work in partnership with the unlimited possibilities. And here's what he said. He didn't call it micromanaging, but he said, we must resolutely put aside all questioning as to the specific means that need to be employed. He said, we're dealing with the infinite, and this intelligence can draw together the means requisite for its purpose, even to the ends of the world. So you are not, this is me now, you are not the Ways and Means Committee. You are not. You get to decide the big, okay, what? But then, what might that be? What do I do? If I can't name all the specifics and manage those, what am I supposed to do? Well, here's what Troward says. Rather than trying to arrange the specifics of your manifestation, determine the quality or the qualities you're going to give to this previously undifferentiated energy. Isn't that a 50-cent word? Undifferentiated energy. He's talking about God, the energy of the universe, this spiritual universe, which is just all there waiting for us to say, this is what I want to be about. This is the direction I want to go. And so he says, determine the qualities or the qualities. He said the specifics are the work of the infinite creative energy itself, which will create perfect forms of expression quite naturally if you allow it. And this is the best part. He says, thus saving you a great deal of needless anxiety. No more tranquilizers. No more anti-anxiety medications. Just trust. And the infinite will take care of the details. What's next? So if you're asking, what's next? Wrap your mind around the qualities of the experience that you are desiring. If you are facing change, if you're thinking about initiating change, what are the qualities? Go to that bigger idea. It might be, I just want to feel safe, secure, supported, energized, prosperous, loved, loving. Those are qualities. Go there. When you're asking what's next, go to that place. And let the Lord do the heavy lifting, as the farmer would say. Let God, let Spirit fill in the details. Believe me, it will. And in ways that you might never imagine. So you have to remember to be flexible. I don't need to know because God knows. So all of this then adds up to number 3. What's falling apart just might be coming together. I'm not going to expand on that a lot because, frankly, I do believe you know. You know that. You heard, I think, last Sunday, the guest speaker reminded us of this, that whatever happens to us is happening for us. That means it may look like it's falling apart, but hang in there. It's falling together in a greater way than you could ever imagine. So trust the process. And speaking of that, and speaking of how the universe works in such great synchronicity, I was thinking about all of this as I was driving a couple of days ago. And I drove by an intersection where there was a bus stop and a man sitting on the bench waiting for a bus. And he had a red T-shirt on, and guess what it said? Trust the process. Now, it happens I was in the mode of kind of ruminating about something that I was a little concerned about, admittedly. And I saw that. I thought, well, you got a lot of nerve. That message was so clear. But see, watch for those things because they're going to be there for you all the time. Trust the T-shirt. I love it. And that just put me at a whole new level. What's next? Trust the process because it is on your side. And so it is. Thank you.